so I will go ahead and get going with introductions and let other folks hopefully join as they straggle in. Hi to everybody, and I've got a significant introduction here to Amy and Troy Van Beek, who are co-owners of Ideal Energy out of Fairfield, in part because we have such a strong solar contractor community in Northeast Iowa and across Eastern Iowa that many of you, certainly in our network, the Energy District Network, may not be as familiar with our guests from down south today. So I'm going to take a moment to introduce their company. Ideal Energy has been a leader in Iowa's solar industry since 2009. From installation to financing and power purchase agreements to battery storage, and now their research into the hydrogen arena. The company is known for quality and leadership, both in the industry and in their home community of Fairfield. The company is a bit unique in being both a woman and veteran-owned firm. Before co-founding Ideal Energy, Amy Van Beek owned and operated Greenfield Properties, a design-build firm where she developed several subdivisions in Southeast Iowa known for their use of natural and non-toxic building materials, high-performance design, and renewable energy. As CMO at Ideal Energy, Amy is the creative director for marketing and public relations. In addition, she oversees Ideal Energy's political initiatives, engagement with NGOs, and industry lobbying efforts. Amy's background educationally includes a BFA in Fine Arts, a graduate certificate, a BFA from Maharishi University, a graduate certificate in Marketing Management from Harvard University Extension Studies, where she is also currently an ALM candidate. Ideal Energy's CEO, Troy Van Beek, returned home to the Midwest in 2006 after spending about 12 years serving in the U.S. Navy SEAL teams and working elite security details in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. He experienced firsthand the security threats and devastating global conflict that surrounds finite carbon-based energy sources. In co-founding Ideal Energy, Troy's new mission was to help implement localized clean energy solutions that reduce global conflict, empower local communities, and create an abundant energy future. Troy holds a BS from Maharishi University in Sustainability Studies. So hydrogen, our topic today, or H2, is an energy-dense molecule with significant potential in the clean energy economy, including energy storage, low emissions fertilizer production as a transportation fuel, and more. Hopefully we'll hear about that range today. Ideal Energy's team has been collaborating with the Iowa Economic Development Authority to develop a value chain that will bring the state's resources and infrastructure together to build a resilient and robust energy future that likely will include clean hydrogen, green hydrogen. So with that, thanks for joining us, Amy and Troy and team. The stage is yours.
Excellent. Thank you. Looks like we have a lot of people joining. So I appreciate the attendance and the opportunity to speak on behalf of Renewable Hydrogen. This is just really excellent timing. We had won this grant on looking at Iowa for Renewable H₂, and some of you may have heard that some of my presentations through the IDA, and that's what kind of sponsored this opportunity. But the timing is really well because we're just finishing our white paper, which was a 2-year grant in looking at the feasibility for Renewable H₂ and the economy for Iowa here. And we're just releasing that. It's going through its final phase through Iowa Economic Development Authority before we actually release it. But we've got a lot of that information, and I've tried to pack it into this presentation. So there's a lot of material here, a short period of time to cover it, but I'll try to give you as deep of an understanding as I can based on our white paper, which is over 70 pages long. And it's just really fantastic, packed with great information and the opportunities for Iowa. So with that said, got to give a lot of credit to Dr. Wilson and Eric Johnson for putting this paper together, the white paper, and a lot of the information that you're about to see here, and the whole Ideal Energy team. Let's see here. Oh, so I need to go ahead and present. Let's see here. So I think I can do this. So do you see, are you seeing this here? Renewable H₂?
Yes, we can. Thanks.
Okay, very good. All right. All right, so a quick recap on the contents. This is I wanted to do a quick introduction. You did a fantastic job, Andy, for the introduction to Ideal Energy. But we'll do a quick introduction, summary of the IEDA Renewable Hydrogen Grant, Renewable Hydrogen, how it works, Renewable Hydrogen in Iowa, the employment and economic impact, which is significant, H₂ opportunities for Iowa, and then next steps. So Iowa Ideal Energy was formed up in 2009, and we have had to be a leader in the industry. We're one of the very first solar companies in the state. So, you know, I always say solar sells solar, but to get it out there, you have to do a lot of educating. So we have had to plow the road on a lot of the technology that's out there. We've applied for grants, won those grants for battery energy storage, now hydrogen. We actually do a lot of cutting edge implementation of that technology to try to push the market forward. We are a veteran-owned company and we're NABCEP certified. In doing that, we have won quite a few awards in our process, and you know, we do this by solving certain problems. So high energy cost, peak demand management, resiliency, and we all got a real taste of that recently through the derecho, and we realized that power is not necessarily, you can't always depend on it. There is that chance of it going down, and that's where distributed energy really does have an advantage. And then corporate sustainability. We're all trying to green up our image for various reasons, at the very least to preserve their planet. Technologies we employ: solar, energy storage, microgrids, AI optimized energy management, and renewable H₂. And that's what we're going to cover here today. So looking at the grant that we did through the Iowa Economic Development Authority, we're laying the foundation for the industrial scale renewable hydrogen production in Iowa. So some of the key deliverables were developing relationships with key stakeholders. So people like yourselves we're reaching out to and trying to do the education as necessary to encourage the adaptation of these opportunities. Producing wind and PV levelized cost of energy roadmaps for the state of Iowa, qualifying production losses due to periodic oversupply curtailment events, developing a renewable H₂ capital equipment supplier matrix and document key cost metrics and trends, producing a cost roadmap for production of renewable H₂ in Iowa, and planning and launching a pilot project. Okay, so renewable H₂ and how it works. So let me just read through this here quick, but H₂ in the new energy future, the energy transition is driven by urgent need to decarbonize the world's energy systems. So generation, distribution, and storage of both zero carbon electricity and carbon neutral chemical energy carrier are required. H₂ is widely viewed as the best choice because it can be easily produced by splitting water molecules using renewable electricity, and it can be used to make ammonia, which is energy dense and easy to store. So I really like this graph. It just kind of breaks down, it gives you a good way to visualize what is happening here. Obviously we have the grid, we have the inputs over here on the left, renewables, anywhere from the biofuels to wind, solar, tidal power are all inputs to the grid, nuclear, fossil fuels, and then we have utilizing that electricity to split molecules through electrolysis, so hydrogen generation, and then we have all these uses of that hydrogen. The transportation industry, anything from small vehicles to large transportation, as in the shipping industry, capturing of CO2 through some of the fuel manufacturers, the ethanol manufacturers, and then creating synthetic fuels, upgrading oil and biomass, ammonia fertilizers, metal refining, and there's other petrochemical opportunities, and of course heating. So also utilizing it as storage, and back into the grid through power generation to start the cycle again. So why is Ideal Energy interested in this? Obviously, we're focused on some of the solutions for the climate issues, and so this really comes front and center. H₂ is a basic feedstock used to produce commodities including the petroleum-based fuels, ammonia, and steel. So today, H₂ is producing almost entirely from fossil fuels. 70 billion kilograms of hydrogen is produced every year. 76% is made from natural gas using SMR, steam methane reform. 24% is made from coal using coal gasification. Most H₂ is used to make ammonia. Ammonia is used to make ammonia-based fertilizers. Ammonia-based fertilizers are most widely used fertilizers worldwide. So ammonia production alone accounts for nearly 2% of global CO2 emissions. That is substantial. So today the US produces greater than 10 million tons of H₂ per year. SMR, the steam methane reform, accounts for 95% of hydrogen produced in the US. So the CO2 emitted from the process is a major source of greenhouse gases. So let's just break that down a little bit. The different types: methane, coal, and water. So steam methane reform, we use this process and you get H₂ and then carbon monoxide, and then they do a water shift gas process to further get more H₂ and then carbon dioxide. Of course, both methane and coal process utilize that system, and you have that release of pollutants. You can capture that carbon dioxide and then reutilize it or store it through the carbon capture sequestration process. And then, of course, with electrolysis, utilizing water, your product is H₂ and O₂. So these can be safely released or captured for future use. And then the storage and application is well known. On-site consumption, it can be utilized. We can put it into specialized pipeline or high pressure tube trailers, liquefied hydrogen tankers, compressed liquid storage tanks. And then some of those end uses are the methanol, ammonia, final chemical products in the chemical agri businesses. In industry, it's the refineries, the steel, the cement, other heat processes, high heat processes. Residential and commercial is using that H₂ blended into the natural gas for distribution, retrofitting pure H₂ storage and transport, municipal and residential scale CHP, and then mobility would be the fuel cells, EV, filling stations, marine transport, and power would be power gen via gas turbine and storage grid balancing. And we'll get into these a little bit more on the opportunities there. So how hydrogen is made. The reason we have this slide put together is because you might hear some of these terms about brown, blue, and green. So utilizing, or brown is basically a consequence of fossil fuels if the CO2 and carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide are released as pollutants. So that would constitute a brown hydrogen. So if you're utilizing that technique and you're capturing through CCS that carbon dioxide, you can be called blue hydrogen. And then green hydrogen is obviously when you're utilizing a renewable fuel source to produce that through electrolysis. And then respectively, it's the same thing with ammonia through the Haber-Bosch process. If you're utilizing brown hydrogen, you get brown ammonia. If you use blue hydrogen, you get blue ammonia. Green hydrogen, you get green ammonia. So you hear those terms quite a bit as this starts to come about, and that's just a little deeper explanation. So the electrolysis process, there's 3 different types that we're focused on here. And The alkaline process is a mature technology. It's over 90 years old, and it's used for high volume, steady state production. Can't really be intermittent for the alkaline process. The PEM, which is the photon exchange membrane, mostly widely available technology. It's flexible and scalable. Current best choice for intermittent operations. So that's what we're kind of looking at here with utilizing different sources of energy like wind and solar. Most recent and planned renewable H₂ projects use the PEM electrolyzers. And then we have solid oxide, which is the newest technology. It's ceramic materials operated at much higher temperature, more efficient and cheaper materials than the PEM. Can also be reversed use as a fuel cell, but this technology is still in the developmental stages. So some of the manufacturers that are looking at these types of electrolysis would be Nel. This is over 90 years old. They look at the alkaline and the PEM systems. Siemens out of Germany, they look at PEM. Plug Power out of the US, and that's a H₂ fuel cell business. They've been going on for about 25 years, and they've entered the PEM electrolyzer business through an acquisition on Geiner ELX. Cummins, other well-known US-based company, and they had another acquisition. They focused on the PEM and alkaline systems. ITM Power out of the UK, focused on PEM. McPhy, alkaline electrolyzers, and then lastly, the Haldor Topsoe, and they are focused on development of the solid oxide electrolysis system. So just to get a little understanding, if we're to look at PEM, how that system looks in its layout. So the electrolyzer stack is the component that produces H₂. PEM electrolyzers are made of a membrane electrode assembly, and it's a current collector with bipolar plates, so positive and negative. And then you have the electrical balance of plant, which is the connection to power source, and the AC transformer, and then an AC to DC rectifier, so that the electrolyzer can use that DC energy. And then the balance, mechanical balance of plant, which is the liquid and gas plumbing, the condensers, the filtration, heat exchange, and storage. So taking in that water, it goes through a filtration process, goes through a condenser, through a circulation pump, heat exchanger, and through the electrolysis, producing the hydrogen, recycling that H₂O back into the system. So that's the basic building blocks of the PEM electrolyzer, just to give you a little deeper understanding. So renewable H₂ in Iowa. So this is what really captured our attention at Ideal Energy. From some of the work that we were doing, we were actually working with one of the lead scientists in the nation for hydrogen. He was a former director at NREL, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, and he exposed us to this map. And basically, this is the hydrogen potential from photovoltaic and onshore wind resources. And here we're looking at basically the wind map, and then the opportunity as it relates here in Iowa, and that's what we're focused on. Iowa is one of the best US states in terms of net renewable H₂ production, potentially because of access to low cost PV and wind power. And of course, if we overlay that with the synthetic fuel production facilities that are there and ammonia production in other refineries in the Midwest area, it puts us right in the middle of this opportunity. So when we saw that, we said, it's time for us to invest into this, which is why we wrote the grant to do this investigation. So Iowa is part of the American Wind Belt and has excellent wind resources. And I'm sure all of you know this, but Iowa generates 57.51% of its energy with wind, the highest percentage of any state in the nation. It is second only to Texas in total installed capacity with 11,660 megawatts. Iowa also has some of the least expensive wind energy resources in the US, with wholesale prices around $15 per megawatt hour. So this is a look at the different service operators and the areas that they operate in, and then taking a look at Iowa has among the least expensive wind energy prices in the US. Our wholesale price is around $15 per megawatt hour, and the average PPA price is about $11 per megawatt hour. And this shows over the years, we're looking at MISO in the light blue, our area, in the prices that we would expect as a result. So we maintain kind of a lower price category here. And then on top of that, the curtailment is a factor in all of this. So the Mid-Intercontinent Independent System Operator, which is Iowa's primary ISO, has the highest wind energy curtailment rates in the nation. So curtailed power is excess power that cannot be used due to the lack of local demand, transmission line congestion, or other factors. MISO curtailment rate is 4.2%. This power could potentially be used to produce renewable hydrogen very inexpensively. So looking at the different service operators, MISO has been maintaining a more consistent curtailment rate. So we do have a lot of wind, and as a result, that energy goes negative cost when we have to shut those turbines down. So that curtailed energy has a value in what we're looking at for hydrogen. So making H2 work in Iowa at scale. Cost is a function of input electricity costs, electrolyzer capital costs, and the plant's capacity factor. So these are how we look at pricing these out. 1 kilogram of H2 has nearly the same energy as 1 gallon of gasoline. For transport, the cost of renewable H2 needs to be around $2 to $2.50 per kg. To compete with the traditional hydrocarbon-based sources of H2 through steam methane reforming, SMR, renewable H2 needs to be around that $1.95 per kg. So looking at this chart over here, this is the steam methane reform process. If we were to look at a 97% capacity factor using 6.6 cent energy, we're way up here at $4.20, steam methane at $1.95. So if we can get down to 2 cents per kWh or 1 cent per kWh, we really start to drop the cost on that. And then through R&D advances, looking at reducing those fixed capital costs and fixed O&M costs, we can further drive that price far lower than the SMR process that's already existing. So our analysis shows that $2 per kg hydrogen may be possible in Iowa today with the current wind energy prices. So we looked at several different arrangements of price, looking at 0 cent energy. Is that possible? Yes, it's possible. If we're having curtailed energy and it's at a negative, we could give that energy away at 0 cost. And at let's say 97% capacity factor, you're below $1 right there. And then as we go up the scale, we go to half a cent, to a cent, to 1.5 cents, and then to 2 cents, we are hitting that $2 per kg. And then we work backwards to the capacity factor all the way down to 40% capacity factor, which is what we would be expecting with wind alone, perhaps. But by implementing wind and solar and potentially batteries, you can push that capacity factor further this way. And so if we're looking at 2 cent energy, we're hitting that $2 per kg. So the levelized cost versus the energy cost. That's kind of the standard we're looking for. And it is possible. It's possible today to do that. So Iowa becoming the new Persian Gulf of the US. This is kind of a tagline, but the potential is there. We are already a leader in wind energy, and the hard part of the energy paradigm to remove is that really dense energy carrier, and that's the petrol fuels, you know, for the heavy transportation industry, and then of course the petrochemicals for farming. So we're looking over renewable H₂ is currently cost competitive in select markets. It may be in Iowa as well. Costs are expected to decline through 2025 as the industry scales. Through the next 5 years, starting in 2020 to 2025, we're looking at a 12 times growth rate. So up through 2019, there was 253 megawatts of electrolyzer capacity installed. And then looking by 2025, they expect 3.2 gigawatts. So we've identified several use cases in Iowa where renewable H₂ is currently cost competitive. Current use cases are co-locating H₂ production sites at wind farms to take advantage of the energy at curtailment events, blending with natural gas to power transit buses, multi-day energy storage. And then for future use cases, we're looking at fueling medium and heavy duty trucking, fueling maritime transit. And, you know, these things are in development, well underway. Aviation fuel, Iowa can produce up to 8% of US commercial jet fuel needs. That's significant. If we were able to do that, that alone would be a game changer. And then decarbonizing the fertilizer production. So employment and economic impact in Iowa. So the global transition to clean energy will contribute trillions of dollars to the world economy. Our projections indicate renewable hydrogen could contribute 1.19 billion in Iowa's gross state product by 2030 and 6.375 billion by 2050. The 2050 estimate exceeds ethanol present day 4.5 billion contribution to Iowa's GSP, which accounts for 3% of Iowa's GSP. For further comparison, total investment in solar to date is 291 million, and total investment in wind to date is 19 billion. There's a lot of opportunity there. And just looking at the jobs per terawatt, renewable hydrogen produced with electrolysis has an employment factor of 575 to 775 jobs per terawatt. So the wind power, we're looking at about 200 to 300 jobs per terawatt. Solar energy is up at about 1,000 jobs per terawatt hour. In terms of jobs per terawatt hour, renewable hydrogen surpasses wind energy and compares favorably with solar. So job impact with the robust renewable H₂ economy, Iowa could see more than 7,000 new jobs by 2030 and 35,000 jobs by 2050. The fuel cell sector alone could yield over 3,000 new jobs. A small renewable hydrogen plant could contribute 10 to 14 jobs, and a large plant could contribute 350 to 471 jobs directly and indirectly. So for comparisons, the solar industry employed 870 people in Iowa as of 2019. The wind industry employed 3,909 people directly in 2019, as well as another 3,000 to 4,000 indirectly. So any politician would love those stats. So opportunities for Iowa: utilities, transportation, fertilizer manufacturers, renewable fuel manufacturers. So let's lay this out. So utilities produce renewable H₂ with megawatt scale PEM electrolyzer systems powered by new megawatt scale PV capacity and excess wind energy from captive wind farms. So using H₂ in gas grid, self-consumption, blend renewable H₂ with natural gas for retail and commercial customers. H₂ can be blended into the national gas grid at 10% with no risk of safety, longevity, and operation of grid or gas using appliances. Higher rates may be possible. So hydrogen, it does cause embrittlement of metals. So at these lower mix rates, there is really zero issue there. So at just 5% H2 in natural gas for the state of Iowa, the electrolysis market is hundreds of gigawatts. So 525 gigawatts for residential, 426 gigawatts for commercial, and 1.8 terawatts for industrial. And that's at a 5% hydrogen blend. These are pretty staggering numbers. So H2 in power plants, self-consumption, blend renewable H2 with natural gas for electricity generation, combined cycle and peaker turbines. Blending H2 and natural gas for the purposes of power generation is the focus of several projects in the US and globally. These projects are motivated by utility research and development with partial funding from the government, preemptive decarbonization efforts in relation to natural gas. Blend ratios below 15% are considered low risk for existing power stations. 5% is considered zero risk. Potential market size, 24/7 electrolysis operation, 380 gigawatts and a 5% blend. So the transportation, Iowa is a transportation hub. Interstate 80 and Interstate 35 meet in Des Moines. The busiest freight line in the US crosses through the state. Iowa has 8 commercial and 100 publicly owned general aviation airports. Iowa is bordered by the Missouri River and Mississippi River, both which are navigable. So truck freight, transportation fuel, sell renewable H2 as fuel into emerging medium and heavy duty H2 vehicle fueling network. So H2 fueling for medium and heavy duty vehicles is an emerging business opportunity, and companies are already positioning to serve the H2 fueling market. In 2015, a trucking industry study reported that 29 billion gallons of diesel fuel was consumed by heavy duty trucks classified as combination vehicles. That's tractors pulling trailers. So this market potential size is 162 terawatts. So a transportation fuel for rail freight, sell renewable H2 to green ammonia to rail operators as transport fuel. So we're looking at the rail lines here. Hydrogen fuel cell and ammonia fuel locomotives are under development worldwide, including domestically in California. The US Class 1 rail industry uses over 3.4 billion gallons of diesel fuel per year, not including switchers. And then, of course, public transit system partnerships, selling renewable H2 as a new fuel for H2 powered transit buses. Des Moines DART has 173 medium heavy duty and articulated buses using the total inventory transit class in the entire state is 250. And the H2 needs, if each were 56 passengers, H2 electric buses with a range of 260 miles per day, then the transit sector water electrolyzer market size estimate for just one bus is 0.39 megawatts, and for 250 H2 electric buses, it's 97.5 megawatts. Fertilizer manufacturers produce green ammonia made from renewable H2 with megawatt scale PEM electrolyzer systems powered by on-site PV plus wind power purchase agreements. Wind and solar, that's the solution. So green ammonia, the global market for ammonia is currently valued at 74.61 billion and is expected to grow at a compounded rate of 5.59 over the next 5 years. Approximately 88% of domestic ammonia is used for fertilizers. Iowa farmers use an average of 139 pounds of nitrogen fertilizer per planted acre. With over 23.6 million acres planted, more than any other state, Iowa's demand for fertilizer exceeds 1.5 million tons per year. You can see why this is making a good use case. So we do have a number of large manufacturers of ammonia in the state of Iowa. And starting in Port Neal Complex, Sergeant Bluff, we have one in Weaver, Iowa, Fort Dodge, Iowa, and Creston, Iowa. And the continuous electrolyzer feed is stated over here, accounts for quite a lot of opportunity. Renewable fuel manufacturers produce renewable H₂ with megawatt scale PEM electrolyzer systems by on-site PV system wind power purchase agreements. So this will break that down a little bit. Green ammonia, building new capacity to enter the emerging green ammonia fuel business, export via rail and pipeline to other states and possibly other countries for electric generation and marine bunker fuel. So the scientists, Greg Wilson, who helped us with this white paper, was actually hired as one of the top scientists for JERA, which is a top energy company in Japan, because of their desire to focus on these hydrogen opportunities. So they're going to be importing a large amount of ammonia for fuel. Green hydrogen, sell compressed renewable hydrogen as a fuel into emerging medium and heavy duty H₂ vehicle fueling network. Green methanol, build new capacity and enter the emerging green methanol fuel and petrochemical refining feedstock businesses using renewable H₂ plus either captured CO2 from the Iowa's ethanol industry or various biomass feedstocks. Export to other states by truck and by rail. Biodiesel, use green methanol to produce biodiesel. Leverage Iowa's 11 biodiesel production facilities. Hydrogenated vegetable oil, build new capacity to produce HVO, a promising aviation fuel alternative. It's already being piloted in the UK. So what are the next steps? Pilot projects. Ideal Energy has modeled use cases for several of the sectors in this presentation and currently is working with key stakeholders in Iowa on potential demonstration projects. So Ideal Energy is actively seeking additional partnerships for H₂ pilot projects in Iowa. So this brings us full circle to our timing on this new federal hydrogen program with the release of our white paper. So the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act provides $9.5 billion in funding for clean hydrogen programs, and that's broken out with $8 billion for 4 regional clean hydrogen hubs. And so that was looking at generally about 4 states that would be open to winning that clean hydrogen hub opportunity. That's still, we're going through a RFI right now to define how this will come together. $1 billion for clean hydrogen electrolysis, research and development, and $500 million for clean hydrogen manufacturing and recycling. So Ideal Energy is currently working with IEDA to respond to the RFI that's put out to accept applications for this hydrogen program. So for the hydrogen, clean hydrogen hubs. So with all of that, that is all I have. I can, if I have anybody's attention still, I can open it up for questions.
I apologize. I had was in other meetings and just got in here just a few minutes ago, but I assume you discussed this in your presentation. How do you actually produce the hydrogen, and if it's through electrolysis, that would seem to take more energy for the whole cycle than you would get out.
So yeah, we did go through that. And what the mission is to drive the cost of electrolysis down. And given the opportunities with low cost wind energy, it's really a factor of capacity of runtime and then the cost of energy. So there's opportunities throughout Iowa with curtailed wind that is either, potentially at a zero cost or a very low cost of energy, utilizing that as feedstock. we can produce competitive price for hydrogen, green hydrogen right now. Of course, we have to have those agreements with certain utilities or arrangements by creating wind opportunities and solar combined to give that high capacity plus low cost wind to be able to produce that clean renewable hydrogen. But that's what the entire white paper and presentation really does break down to the best of our ability to show that potential is really here now, but will only get better with this massive need for green renewable hydrogen that is emerging over the next 5 years.
Great. This is Andy. And just a quick note, everyone, feel free to put your questions into the chat and I can ask them or Troy can see them. Or if you want to speak up yourself, that's all right too. Maybe just put your hand up so we don't have everyone talking at once. There is one in the chat too that I'll repeat here right now. Troy, how are T&D costs factored into the economic feasibility?
Are the R&D costs, is that what you said?
It said T&D, so I'm not sure if he's talking here about transmission distribution on the grid when it comes to those applications, maybe.
Yeah. So obviously there's certain scenarios where that would become a factor. Now, one thing that we didn't outline here in this presentation is that there is the New Star pipeline. So there's an ammonia pipeline that runs through the state of Iowa, and it comes up from Louisiana. We currently are an off-taker of ammonia that is being utilized, but it's also an opportunity to plug right into that as ammonia producers, green ammonia into that New Star pipeline. So being close to the off-takers is obviously an advantage, and that's why we need the low cost drivers to really get us close to that current SMR pricing. So with transportation factored in, that's why we're shooting for that $2 per kg.
Great. Thank you. Chris asks, thinking about record droughts out west, I'm curious how much water this process would use.
That's a good question, and I don't have an answer for you offhand. But obviously it is a water intensive process. We are utilizing the amount of water, it's splitting those water molecules. So there is a source that is absolutely necessary in this process. I wish I had the answer per kg, what the total value is, and that's something I will take note of and have for further conversations.
Super, thanks. We'll share that info out then if we get it. And Jim asks, do you have any suggestions for use of H₂ in production of biodegradable plastics? Is that a end use that your study included?
No, I can check with the team on some of that. If Greg Wilson was here, he is a chemist that would be all over that question. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure there's many use cases currently for hydrogen, but I haven't heard that particular one.
Okay, next question from John. If used as electric storage, what's the loss from directly using the originally produced electricity? So I assume he means round trip life cycle from renewable power to hydrogen back to renewable power on the grid.
Yeah, it can be significant. And that's why we outline, with current technology, obviously R&D, the investments into these opportunities so that like solid oxide, which is, does give you that full round trip. You can turn it backwards and turn it into electricity. These advancements will pick that up considerably, but just as hydrogen, the round trip efficiency is not great, but utilizing it as a direct fuel does obviously prove to be very significant opportunity.
And just to add on to that then briefly, I mean, the big cost here in the process of making hydrogen, especially from renewable power, is the electrolyzer, correct? I mean, you've got the power, the electricity input, but electrolyzers themselves carry significant costs. And those costs are evolving dramatically, just like the market evolution of batteries and solar panels before that, right? Can you talk to the price changes in the electrolyzers?
Yeah, well, this is quite old technology. It's been utilized for quite some time. As I pointed out in that slide, some of this stuff is, 90 years old. But the further research on how to get this out to market more efficiently is improving all the time. And of course, it's just like when we first started with CDs, just by manufacturing, costs come down. And that's what that one chart I was expressing the need for R&D will continually refine that those costs, those fixed costs.
So Mike asks, what is your ideal pilot project you're seeking right now?
Well, working directly with some of the ammonia factories, I think would be fantastic. Just being able to green up the systems that are currently in existence, I think are very viable. Those would be kind of a first and foremost, but I think, working with the biofuels industry, I think, captured carbon dioxide and then reutilizing that. The opportunity that we were spelling out about the jet fuel opportunity, if we could create pilot projects that started moving that opportunity, because we have such a massive investment into the ethanol industry currently, taking that ethanol into ethylene and then to Jet A, really is an incredible opportunity for Iowa. So looking at that and at least getting interest and then investment dollars to start unfolding that opportunity, I think really could unfold big opportunity for Iowa. But again, there's already this massive ammonia production opportunity that's happening, greening up those facilities, producing entirely new green ammonia production facilities, since we're such a massive consumer of it, is fantastic. And getting it into the hands of large transportation as a fuel, or the rail lines as well.
Yeah, good. And related to that, then, this question here, what are the storage and transportation challenges for using H₂ as vehicle fuel?
Yeah, H₂, it's more challenging than, let's say, ammonia, because ammonia is more stable, and it's a very dense energy carrier. And that's where I feel like ammonia is kind of, we're shifting from the idea of the hydrogen fuel cars that are out there. I think electricity or the lithium batteries are kind of overtaking that on the small vehicles, but the opportunity for large transportation, to include like the rail lines, and for large shipping industry, I think that the opportunity is there. So we see ammonia being transported down the road all the time in the state of Iowa. It's anhydrous ammonia. So that's understood very well. The embrittlement of metals through the transportation of hydrogen, and the high compression that's needed to transport that as a liquid is quite intensive. So turning it into ammonia or turning it into HVO, which is a hydrogenated vegetable oil, is really interesting. So
Right.
You can stick it into that hydrogenated vegetable oil and then pull it out on the other end if you were to transport it, and then reutilize that vegetable oil again and again and again. I don't know how many trips that you can get out of it, but it's probably at least 4+. So there's some interesting ways that we will circumnavigate through the issues that hydrogen has. But hydrogen has also been utilized quite extensively, and Plug Power being one of those companies out there that has been utilizing it for their fuel cell in forklift operations. And they kind of started up in California, and they built a multi-billion-dollar business off of that operation that they have. So they utilize it in combination with the fuel cell and run forklifts for very big operations.
Is this follow-up to the storage and transportation challenges, is H₂ suitable for use by plants like ADM where there are significant heat requirements?
are there significant heat requirements?
In plants like ADM where they have significant heat requirements, I guess you may be asking, is it just another fuel source to replace gas in those situations, or is it
Yeah.
like limited by the mixing ratios that you discussed?
Well, hydrogen is an excellent source for heating high temperature processes. So I'm not sure if that's what you're driving at, but as an opportunity for that, that's a real possibility. We haven't investigated. We understand that that is something that is necessary, and in a lot of high heat industries, it has value to that. Of course, blending is one way to accomplish that with the already existing fuel sources that are there, and then it's used in the semiconductor industry already quite extensively. So we've used hydrogen in these industries for a long time. In the metal refining and all that is already currently being utilized, but greening up that process makes a lot of sense, is what the goal is.
Right. So another related question here to the infrastructure says, we have a lot of natural gas infrastructure. Is there a potential to convert natural gas equipment into H2 equipment, or would everything have to be replaced? And this, again, may be related to the impacts on metals and
Yep.
blending.
So certain studies have shown that you can go as high as 25% without any significant changes to other equipment that is utilizing that gas. But, really without any issues, zero risk, 5% can be utilized in the natural gas, commercial off-takers, own power production through peaker plants. All of that at 5% is what we were modeling earlier. And I know I flew through some of those slides, but that's what we were looking at, and looking at all the gigawatt potential that, when we convert that into dollars, saved or transformed, and we've got something significant. But just at 5%, we were looking at gigawatt potential changeover.
Okay, next question. What might be potential human health concerns from exposure to green ammonia or green H2, green NH4 or green H2? So,
well, I'll address that just by saying that it's the only difference between green H2 and Haber-Bosch process is that it's done through renewable energy. So it's a factor of H2 and then nitrogen, which is 80% of the air we breathe, and mixing those two, and that gives you ammonia. So it still harbors the same amount of health risks that ammonia and hydrous ammonia would, if we're talking about green ammonia. So the same concerns are there. It's just that it's also a very dense fuel carrier. And it always has been. It's just that we're exposing that opportunity. And, there's actually demonstration projects that, there's a farm here in Iowa that is running its tractors off of ammonia and producing ammonia on site. Jay Schumacher is doing that here in Iowa. So, it's the same issues, but we want to green up that process because that ammonia production is accounting for 2% right now for global carbon emissions. And that's a major source of impact to our climate.
yeah, I agree. The ammonia issues and fertilizer is intriguing to me, and I might have one or two more questions, but we'll get through what we have. And right now, could H2 completely decarbonize metal refining?
Well, that's a good question. Not knowing enough about metal refining, greening up metal refining, you start with the whole process of digging up fuels, digging up metals. So that's going to be hard to green up. But obviously we use metals, so there's certain factors in that process that can be greened. And hydrogen has been slated as an opportunity for that high heat process.
Yeah, it's interesting because just industrials in general, right, is one of the biggest challenges to decarbonize as a sector. So I'm just going to get back really quickly to the fertilizer question. And you reviewed the economics of green hydrogen in, especially depending on the cost of power in electricity sector. And of course, fertilizer manufacturing is largely dependent on natural gas as energy and feedstock input today. And you're talking in part about significantly just shifting the feedstock and energy source to hydrogen. So then it would also really be dependent in part, the economics of that process for green fertilizer on the price of gas, right? And your studies must obviously have looked at that, but that's been changing quickly recently. And what do you think about that? What are those options looking like?
Yeah, I mean, we've gone from $200 per metric ton of ammonia to over 1,000, So obviously, and that's a factor of natural gas prices.
Right.
And so, yeah, that's one of the advantages that we would have through a stabilized cost of energy through power PPAs, with wind and solar. What you're getting. As long as the sun comes up the next day, we're in there. And so we can pretty much depend on that. That's what we always say with solar. But combining those two, because there is intermittent power, we can get a much more stable cost, higher capacity factor for the production of this, but we can very accurately predict the energy potential from a situation like that, where you can't predict, where we're going to be at with natural gas.
Right. Yep. Agreed. And so one last question, we're getting close to the end of time here and there's nothing else in the chat room right now. So quickly put one in, folks, if you've got a burning question. And I want to expand just a little bit, Troy, then, or give you a chance to expand too on this idea of empowering essentially the growth of a big green grid. And essentially this kind of a use is something that is demand side flexible for large scale renewables. So we talk a lot about needing a lot of storage on the grid as we get more renewables. And on the one hand, hydrogen can be a storage element. On the other hand, just the manufacture of storage can be an enabler of the growth of many more gigawatts of renewable power, because then what you're doing is you have this intermittent grid, and what you want is you could overbuild renewables. This is just a scenario, right, for greening the grid again. We can overbuild renewables so that at times of lower production, we still have a large, quote, base load of renewables. But when the wind is really blowing and the sun is really shining, we may have a lot more than we need. But that's not really the case, that we have too much if we build the industries to utilize that cheap power when it's available. And that's to a significant degree what you're talking about with a hydrogen economy.
There's so many factors that go into that. And you're right. Overbuilding, adding in battery energy storage, and it doesn't necessarily have to be hydrogen. We can utilize hydrogen as long-term storage, and that was one of the big focuses early on with hydrogen, because it doesn't have any degradation factor into it. We can store it for long periods of time. So you can utilize hydrogen to store that energy, but also with the continual advancements of even lithium batteries, we can add in large solar, large wind, and large battery capacity, build that grid to have that advantage, really stable energy costs, and then be manufacturing hydrogen for all the uses that are out there. And of course, the advances will allow us to store hydrogen better, reutilize it, turn it through fuel cells, and being able to power everything that's out there. And the really interesting thing about all of this is that that energy paradigm that we have, a lot of it can be replaced with electricity currently with renewables, with the battery energy storage and what we're doing currently with renewables. But there's that really dense energy that's necessary for the transportation, other petrochemicals that just can't be replaced otherwise. And so utilizing hydrogen in this whole metrics can pretty much cover all the bases. So we can completely green up our grid energy-wise through this process, and including hydrogen and green ammonia as part of that.
Very good. So we are after 1 o'clock. I want to respect everybody's time, including yours, Troy, but thank you so much for joining us. We really do appreciate it. Maybe we can revisit this conversation again at some point in the future. So
yeah, I appreciate the invitation, and I hope that this was informative, and And yeah, if anybody has any questions, they can reach out to Ideal Energy, and we'll be happy to speak with them.
Super. Thanks again, Troy. Thanks everyone for joining us. We'll see you again next month.
Take care.